Okay, welcome everyone to Hiring Smart. What's best for your business, employees, or contractors? We have a new presenter, and we're very pleased to welcome Karl vanVonno from 24/7 VA. We are going to do a little bit of an introduction to SCORE, and then we'll turn it over to Karl. So, I want to make sure that you know everything there is to know about SCORE so that you're taking full advantage. Our goal is to share small business information and education with you. We do that in a couple different ways. One is through our website, score.org. Lots of great information there, templates, articles, blogs, other previously recorded workshops, lots of great information. So take a look there. The other way we share information is obviously through our workshops and webinars. We do advertise those through social media, on our newsletter, and on our website. I think, though, the most important thing that SCORE does is offer mentoring. Our mentors are volunteers. They come to SCORE with a wide variety of skill sets and experiences that they've learned from that they want to share with you. We work with folks that are at all steps, whether you're trying to decide if going into that small business is right for you, if you're in that planning phase in your business, growing your business, or exiting your business, we can assist you along that way. So a beginning session is going to be probably around 45 minutes. They want to learn about you and what your goals and challenges are, and they're going to help you put together a plan so that you can be successful. It's not uncommon that your primary mentor will invite others to assist along the way as your needs change and as you go down your small, excuse me, your small business ownership path. So the next question obviously is going to be, how do I get that mentor? Score.org, simplest way. Look for the box that says, let us do the matching for you. Put your zip code in, and that will match you to the chapter that's nearest you. A little sheet will pull up. We want to know what your business is and what your current goals are or your current situation is, and we'll use that information to match the most appropriate mentor. So today we are going to use Q&A. If you can please put any questions that you think of along the way for Karl, put those into Q&A, and I'll make sure that those get read out at the end, and we'll try and make sure we can answer everybody's questions. We should have time for that today. We are recording, and the recording will be posted in about 24 to 48 hours. You can go to the score.org/Boston website, and you can see there from the graphic the local workshops pull down, and it's listed under there under previously recorded webinar. So I'm going to go ahead and pull down my share and go ahead and turn it over to our presenter. Welcome, Karl.
Hey everyone. If you can't hear me, Teresa, please let me know. But good afternoon. Thank you to SCORE Boston for having me here today. My name's Karl vanVonno. I'm the VP of Growth at 24/7 VA. So one of the most common decisions business owners face is whether to bring someone on as an employee or to work with them as a contractor. In this session, we'll break down the real differences between the two, the hidden costs most owners overlook, the compliance rules that cannot be ignored, and a decision-making framework you can apply directly to your business. So moving on to the next slide. So what's holding your business back? Think about your average week. How much of your time is spent on activities that directly bring in revenue, and how much is spent just keeping the business running? For many small and mid-sized business owners, the challenges fall into three main categories. Not enough time for core tasks. You're bogged down in admin work, email, scheduling, and follow-up. High labor costs, wages, benefits, and payroll taxes are rising every year, as we know. Onboarding and training new team members. Every hire requires time and resources before they're productive. And moving on to the next slide. So these are some common questions about worker classifications that we hear all the time from business owners. The two most prominent being, should I hire part-time or an independent contractor? And are independent contractors really cheaper? So what you'll learn today, the truth, it depends. There is a lot of misinformation out there, but today we'll clear up the confusion by covering the clear distinctions between worker classifications, the compliance obligations you need to understand, the total cost, not just the hourly rate, and a decision-making framework you can use to choose the right option for your business. Next slide. So we can broadly divide workers into two main types: W-2 employees or 1099 independent contractors. For employees, they're typically full-time, part-time, or temporary. Full-time being 40 hours a week with benefits included, part-time being fewer hours a week. Benefits may vary for those part-time employees, and then temporary roles, which are fixed-term roles, often through agency. Whereas independent contractors or 1099 independent contractors, they're either onshore, nearshore, or offshore. So onshore would be a contractor based in the same country as you or your business. Nearshore would be an individual located in a neighboring country or similar time zone, such as Canada or Mexico, if you're located in the US. And offshore is based in a more distant country, being somewhere like the Philippines or India, often with a larger time difference. However, these offshore employees will generally work around your business's hours, and it depends on the situational setup to make that work with an offshore employee. So location does play a role, but the real difference comes from the structure of the working relationship. And moving on to the next slide. So the IRS and the Department of Labor look at three main factors to determine whether you're an employee or an independent contractor. So the three main factors involve behavioral control, financial control, or type of relationship. For behavioral control, employees will follow your process, schedule, and tools, whereas contractors, you give them the what and they decide how they will complete the work. For financial control, employees have taxes withheld and rely on you for tools and expenses. Contractors handle all their own tools and expenses. Regarding type of relationship, employees are integral to your daily operations and often permanent. Contractors may work on projects or serve multiple clients while serving your company. It's not enough to call someone a contractor in the agreement. The reality of the working relationship determines their classification. So misclassification can lead to penalties, back taxes, and legal issues. And the next slide. So moving into compliance. So when hiring employees, you're responsible for all the withholding, payroll, and income taxes, providing benefits if applicable, following state labor laws on wages, overtime, and breaks, covering workers' comp and unemployment insurance. And then separately for US-based independent contractors, you don't withhold taxes, but you must issue a 1099 if they earn over $600 a year from you, which in most cases they probably will, unless it's just project-based. Just a side note, some businesses even engage independent contractors long-term by renewing contracts regularly, which would traditionally be a relationship if you work with a more established staffing firm. And that's how you bring independent contractors into your business on a more full-time basis as opposed to project by project. So just an important note for international contractors, different tax forms may apply, such as the W-8 BEN, but the individual contractors' labor laws govern the employment protections and requirements for them. Again, this is a reason for using a well-established staffing firm, because assuming their infrastructure is set up properly and they follow all the proper guidelines, they'll handle all of these different labor laws that may apply to your individual contractor you're looking to bring into your company. Moving on to the next slide. So this goes over the real cost, comparing employees and independent contractors. So for employees, you see they'll have a base compensation. Payroll taxes, generally 7 to 8%, are required for Social Security and Medicare. You'll have to file federal and state unemployment taxes. Benefits like health insurance, PTO, and retirement often add 20 to 40% of the salary, which is your business's expense. You'll most likely be required to have workers' comp insurance for them as well. There's additional recruitment onboarding costs, which are generally much higher for employees when compared to independent contractors. And you'll also be required to have office space and equipment. If tractors a little more simple, you pay the agreed rate. They cover their own taxes, benefit, and equipment. So when does each option make sense for your particular business? So for employees, in order for them to be the right fit, these are generally the things you'll look for. So if you're looking for direct oversight and training, someone in the office learning specific process daily, an employee may be better fit for your business. Full integration into your culture, they're fully committed to your business and mission. Stronger IP control, employment contracts often make intellectual property rights simpler, and less legal ambiguity. The classification's clear if they're an employee. And so here's when contractors may be a smarter choice. Moving on to the next slide. So contractors shine when you want flexibility to scale up or down, access to niche expertise, lower overhead, freedom to focus on your core business, access to a global talent pool, and predictable costs when fixed project or hourly rates exist. And if you're hiring offshore, here are a few more factors to consider. Offshore contractors can be a game changer, but they require careful management. So these 6 items here pretty much describe the way you want to look into if you're searching for offshore contractors. So the first being talent sourcing and vetting, skills assessments, background checks, and references. And just a note before I go through all these are all typical things that an established staffing firm would handle for you. So if they have a cybersecurity infrastructure, if they have the proper HR compliance, if they have the proper communication to and with the virtual staffer, if they're doing proper talent sourcing and vetting through a rigorous recruitment process, these are all the sorts of questions you would want to be asking the quote unquote more established virtual staffing agencies. So just continuing, overlapping, a little of what I just said. You want to look for clear expectations, not overlapping hours between any other work they may have, cultural understanding if you're a US-based business of what you're looking for. For cybersecurity, secure platforms, strict access controls, and data agreements. For compliance, you want to make sure local and international labor laws are being followed. Performance monitoring, you want to make sure you're able to track KPIs, regular check-ins, and have clear goals with your virtual staffer. And again, the most important is agency credibility and accountability. You want to ensure the staffing agency you hire through has a strong internal infrastructure to support all the considerations on this slide that we discussed, such as comprehensive recruiting, robust cybersecurity measures, HR compliance, account managers, and being an established business with reviews or years in business or different awards or accolades. These are all different things you want to look for in an established firm before you hire. So next, we're going to consider or compare the numbers side by side. So this goes over estimated monthly costs between an employee and an independent contractor. The information is based off an administrative support employee and an administrative virtual assistant. These statistics are based from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, so we would find that they're probably pretty accurate. You see the minimum for an employee, the minimum wage is there. There's benefits, which we said they're between 20 and 40% of their overall salary, which this falls about there. Office resources, seat in office. So you're looking somewhere in the $6,000 to $7,000 range for a typical admin employee that's US based. For a virtual assistant, these projected costs, it's literally just the hourly rate that you're really required to pay, and everything else is kind of taken off the books as when being compared to a traditional employee. So you see the cost difference. It's somewhere in the realm of 80% that you save by outsourcing versus having an in-house employee. And we found that statistic over the years has stayed pretty consistent. So what can you outsource? You can outsource almost any role that isn't tied to a physical location. So just to give some examples, administrative, anything calendar, email, data entry, or back-end office that you can hand off to someone else. Business support, being sales support, customer service, or calling roles. Technical roles, which would involve website management, IT support, or website or app development, depending on how high tiered the particular staffer is. Creatives, so graphic design, video editing, social media management, anything involving the creative sphere. There's large pools of offshore workers who are very good at this stuff and have a great understanding and are very highly trained in these sorts of things, which I know is a very popular field that most businesses need some level of help in. There's also industry and niche specific roles. So things such as real estate coordination, construction, virtual staffing roles, healthcare billing, and pretty much any other niche service you can imagine that can be done virtually. And lastly, voice roles. This kind of goes hand in hand with business support in certain ways, but the voice roles mostly covers inbound and outbound calling, such as virtual receptionist, sales calling, lead outreach calling, or training roles within your business. We've seen people bring in virtual staffers like this who maybe are brought in to do trainings throughout their company, and they're just good speakers and good at relaying information across and reliable. So the voice roles also have a lot of different kind of pivots on how you could utilize those within your company. So next, I'm going to go into sharing a little about my own journey in virtual staffing and how it's helped me in my career and why I find myself, working with 24/7 today. So when I first started in construction, I was a civil engineer out of college. So naturally, my first career pivot was into custom home building. I felt like I was doing everything, managing crews, preparing estimates, scheduling subcontractors, fielding client calls, chasing down vendors, even creating marketing materials, trying to run social media. The reality was, as a sole business owner, it spreads you thin and you're constantly reacting instead of leading. So the turning point really came when I brought on my first full-time administrative VA, which I found was the easiest segue into getting into figuring out virtual staffing and how it could help my business, because administrative VAs, you'll find, are very multifaceted and they can handle a lot of different sorts of tasks. Some of them may be better than others at certain tasks, but they're very multidimensional. So this particular administrative VA became the operational backbone of my business. I had them managing my inbox and filtering priorities, scheduling subcontractors, inspectors, and client meetings, coordinating vendor deliveries and timelines, following up with clients for decisions and approvals, organizing and maintaining project documents, and all sorts of things like that. So that one hire really freed up every single day so I could focus on winning projects, building client relationships, improving systems, and really focusing on tasks that were growing my business as opposed to keeping my business operational on a day-to-day basis. From there, I was able to layer my team with specialized VAs. So this is going into more of the VA categories that I mentioned in the last slide, but I was able to bring in graphic designers, marketing specialists, estimating and construction estimating supporters, project support VAs to help track projects and all the orders going on cross-dimensionally between my portfolio of projects. My construction career, although it continued and is still continuing, eventually transitioned into real estate as well, where I got licensed as a Maryland and Virginia realtor. I applied the same model and brought in one core admin VA to handle most of my day-to-day real estate tasks. So things like scheduling, updating my CRM, and transaction paperwork, drafting any sort of document as a draft that I needed for clients. So basically, I would start with something that was 80 and 90% of what I needed, as opposed to starting from scratch, on all these documents. And this really helped me get my real estate career started and enabled me to be able to have a real estate career aligned with my current construction journey. Over time, my passion for the value of virtual staffing grew so much that it became a natural progression for me to move into a new role where I could help other businesses achieve similar results. So now my current work with 24/7 VA, I still rely on VAs every day, just in slightly different ways. So they still manage my schedules, handle a lot of my research and follow-ups. They still help me prepare materials for meetings and presentations, such as this one today. They're still supporting any internal projects or other projects I have going on, separate from my role with 24/7. And they also help me assist with the implementation of all these different projects I'm working on, within the company. So the most important part across construction, real estate, and now consulting, the pattern has been exactly the same for me in my experience with virtual staffing. A dedicated admin VA has created stability and keeps daily operations running smoothly. Specialized VAs are able to be brought in, whether part-time or full-time, or on a project-by-project basis, to add targeted skills that are in demand, allowing for rapid adaptation and scalability for different projects and different parts of my companies. Looking back, my biggest breakthroughs didn't come from working more hours or adding more stress. They came from building a flexible, talented virtual team around me. Independent contractors gave me the freedom to step out of the weeds, focus on the work only I could do, and scale in ways that would have been impossible with traditional hiring methods. That's the real value of virtual staffing. It's not just a way to save money, it's a way to buy back your time, increase your capacity, and create a business that can grow without burning you out. So that's the gist of my story as it relates to virtual staffing, and hopefully I was able to give you some sort of idea of kind of the real world application and how it fits in more niche fields. Being construction and real estate is where I have most of my experience, but it's adaptable and can fit in pretty much any business type, as long as the tasks are able to be done virtually. So moving on to the next slide. So when you're deciding what the right choice is, employee versus independent contractor, these are some of the important things to consider. So level of control needed. How much control do you need over the process? If it's something you need absolute maximum control over, maybe an employee makes more sense, but things you can offload to a virtual staffer, I would say that an independent contractor would be the better decision in that case. The duration of need, is this ongoing or project-based? The core function or peripheral support. Is this task central to your business, or is it just a supportive role? Budget's always important. So you want to look at the total cost, not just the hourly rate. And also always consider risk tolerance. So how much compliance risk are you willing to take? And again, this lends to the more vetted and established the staffing firm you're hiring from, the less likely you're going to be taking much, if any, risk when hiring a virtual staffer, versus if you're looking more on the freelance market, you're going to have much less control over the staffer and really what's going on. And you also will have to handle things such as the payroll, HR compliance, any sort of cybersecurity measures or data protection. These are all reasons why prominent virtual staffing companies have become the name of the game in a lot of ways for independent contractors, as opposed to when the internet first started booming. The freelance market was really where the only place you could find these virtual staffers. So over the years, these more established businesses have been able to really provide for a safe structure for businesses to start utilizing independent contractors, whether very part-time, project by project, or up to full-time, and then continue to grow their teams using virtual staffing. So just a couple notes: always consult with your legal and tax professional, no matter what business decision you're making. Document everything regarding your communications with different virtual staffing firms or with freelancers. And then working with reputable agencies. Again, this just alludes to, you want to use trusted hiring channels if you're, looking to grow and scale your teams using independent contractors, because that's really going to pay off in the long run, ensuring that you're making the best investment and the safest investment. So moving on to the next slide. So if you're interested in finding your next employee, this slide will list some typical ways and areas where you're going to find these. So online job boards, of course, are always an option, such as Indeed, LinkedIn, Facebook groups. Those are all sorts of job boards that have a wide reach, where you can start to kind of source and vet and recruit different sorts of employees. Professional networks and referrals. So this maybe alludes a little more to a LinkedIn, but those are always great areas to look for employees. Headhunters or specialized recruiters. I know if you're looking for more specialized positions, sometimes these are the way to go, but often you'll have to pay some sort of finder's fee to these companies. And then, of course, local and community resources. Then moving on to the next slide, if you're interested in finding an independent contractor, this slide will list some common areas where you can find those. So online marketplaces, again, for project-based work, specific skills or short-term needs. Remote staffing agencies, which is the most recommended area to look for these particular type of staffers. Remote staffing agencies, you'll find, are vetted and built more for long-term engagements. So this is where you'll be engaging with a firm who handles all of the back end for your staffer while you just pay the fixed hourly rate. Of course, professional networks for niche skills, again, similar to LinkedIn or Facebook groups. And then social media groups. Sometimes these are kind of niche areas where this I guess would allude most to Facebook, but there's other platforms separate of Facebook that have these groups that are very niche. If you're looking for one particular type of staffer and you want to handle kind of the front and back end, yourself. But of course, just the last thing I'll say is, the vetting is key, and this is why remote staffing agencies really provide the best platform to break into the independent contractor market. However, you're always, free to search these other areas as mentioned. And in closing, thank you for joining me today. I hope this gave you a clear and practical framework for deciding between employees and contractors. I also hope my personal excerpt helped kind of give you some real world insight into exactly how this works in real time for real businesses. And hopefully that enabled you to be able to kind of visualize how this potentially could work inside or around your company. If you'd like more information, you can download or scan the QR code, which was on the screen. I'm not sure where it went. Maybe Teresa, if that's the end. And my contact info, my email and my phone number is also on that slide. So feel free to reach out if you have any questions, and I'll open it up to any questions that came in through my presentation.
Yeah, well, did lose that last slide, but we will send a follow-up email and make sure that everybody gets your contact information and that QR code.
Okay.
I'm not sure what happened there quite, but anyway, I do have
Yeah,
a
me neither.
question.
Sorry.
Any guidance for nonprofits who are using field staff who work less than 10 hours weekly?
Um, there may be. I know most established virtual staffing firms typically they'll have a minimum. I know some may offer things like a flexible pack where you just buy hours and you can use it that way, as opposed to having like a part-time, 10-hour a week virtual staffer. But I guess the question is, if they had someone that if they only needed someone for less than 10 hours a week, what are their options?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I would say, some established firms, they'll offer packs where you can buy a certain amount of hours, in a certain allotted time frame. And then that would be kind of the scenario that would make the most sense. So if they only needed them a few hours a week, let's say they would buy a 24-hour pack or 25-hour pack, utilize that until it was used up, and then they would, kind of renew or something, some sort of contract situation like that with a staffing firm. Or the other option would be just find a freelance, a freelance independent contractor who would be willing to work those, significantly reduced hours. I will say the less, under 10 hours, it becomes, at least I've seen in the market, if you have a freelancer working less than 10 hours a week, then if a new opportunity jumps into the picture, a lot of times they'll jump to the better opportunity. So if you were to, go that route and have someone working less than 10 hours, my best advice would be to, find one of these established virtual firms that have these packages where you just buy hours, and then you're free to utilize those however you want with the virtual staffer.
Okay.
But typically most will have a minimum part-time, for them, because they are handling so much of the back end. Less than 10 hours becomes kind of obsolete.
Okay. Do VAs verbally communicate directly with your clients and contractors, or are they communicating only via email and other nonverbal ways?
No, they communicate with the client, as much or as little as they want. So a traditional, well-established virtual staffing company would have a whole vetting process for the candidate before they're even put in front of the client. And that would be part of their recruiting stream. And then once they do get in front of the client will have the opportunity to interview multiple candidates for the particular position. And then the whole setup would also be handled by the staffing company, as far as once the candidate's selected, the whole onboarding and nesting of that assistant, so that by the time the onboarding's completed, they're functioning as intended and already bringing value to that person's business. Regarding communication, that's all really determined between the client and the virtual staffer. And it's really up to the client, however much or little communication they want. I've seen ones that communicate at touch points, maybe every couple hours during the shift every day, touch point meetings weekly, things like end of day reports may be required by some clients and not by others. And then the virtual staffing firm that's managing the staffer, they basically handle any issues that may arise, follow up with the client to ensure that they're happy with everything every so often after the onboarding, um, and handling any sorts of weird things that may come up, like resignations or um, a staffer being placed improperly and the client wanting to consider maybe some more options after some time has passed.
Okay. Um, what if an employee requests to you have an employee that's full-time, but they want to move to part-time? And the question, it says part-time contractor, but I just want to clarify, just because somebody's part-time doesn't make them automatically a contractor. They can still be an employee. So how do you smooth that transition to make sure that they are now actually a contractor and not your part-time employee? Does that make sense what I said?
Yeah, so going back to kind of that particular slide, the employees are different than contractors. The regulations, are completely different. The way it's spelled out in the U.S. is a contractor is more project based, or they're not a full-time employee, versus the taxes and everything's completely different for employees. So with the employees, you're going to file the W-8. With the independent contractor, you're going to file the 1099. The relationship is really, in a lot of ways, just completely different. So if you were to switch someone to being a part-time employee, they would still file the same taxes and be handled the same as a traditional employee. You just may not be required to give them the same level of benefits or different things within your company as you would full-time employee. But independent contractors, you file the 1099 and they're paid an hourly rate, and that's pretty much the extent of the relationship.
Okay. Do you recommend HR management to be virtual for a startup?
um so a more reputable virtual staffing firm will have HR management. They will have payroll processing. They will have cybersecurity, either basic cybersecurity features or more advanced ones, that to track exactly what your staffer is doing. I know every company kind of handles it different, but that's kind of my best answer for that is, yes, if you're looking for a virtual staffing firm, you want to make sure they cover all these bases and that's explicitly stated on their website or exactly how they're doing it, because there are an increasing amount, just being with social media and the internet the way it is nowadays, there are an increasing amount of virtual staffing firms that are popping up advertising crazy low rates or some sort of really quick entry into getting started. But I just would advise anyone on this call and anyone I talk to just to be really careful. Be really careful who you're hiring from, because you really want to do your back end research and make sure that whatever company you're talking to really has put the proof in the pudding and it has everything that you're looking for in a virtual staffing firm. So sure, HR compliance is one aspect of it, but if you go back to my previous slide I had up with what you want to consider, not only compliance, but you want to worry about the local and labor laws. You want to worry about the cybersecurity. You want to worry about how the payroll is being processed. Your best bet is to use someone who handles all this for you, and then there really is little to no risk to your business.
Okay. What advice do you have in determining how much help you need from a remote contractor to work on administrative tax, social media, etc.? What happens when you need to adjust the number of contract hours and type of work you need, as your business changes and grows?
So my answer to that is there's really two ways you can bring on virtual staffing. One would be project based and one would be part or full time. The easiest first step, which is what I did 6+ years ago, but make a, just, it can be any sort of list, but make a list of kind of every daily task you're doing. Take that list and figure out which ones of those tasks could be done virtually or by someone else other than you if they were trained properly. Figure out the amount of hours you project that that will take to handle by someone else. And at that point, you'd be, if you're going to any staffing firm or any sort of company that's offering virtual staffing, you'll be way ahead of the curve of what they're going to ask you. And at that point, they'll help direct you. Hey, we have virtual staffers that can do this. We have more multifaceted staffers that can do this. But here's how we can help you with your slew of work you're doing every day. So that first step of really just figuring out what's going on every day, and then what could be taken off your hands if you had someone else there to help you, is kind of the first step. And if you take that and go to a staffing company with that information, your process and everything you're doing is already going to be, very escalated. And really, it will allow you to get set up, quicker if you already have all those things figured out in your head, because that's all the sorts of questions they're going to be asking you is really, what's the purpose that you're looking to achieve by bringing in a virtual staffer? Where does it fit in your business? Let's really get down to the bottom of why, where, and how you need one, and, how much, kind of alluding to the number of hours and those sorts of things. And the easiest way is to start small. Start, if you think it's 20 hours of work a week, then start with one part-time staffer that's 10 hours a week, and fill out their schedule and make sure they're accomplishing everything you're expecting every day, and then start to ramp them up and give them more tasks. But my one thing I would say, in regards to that question, is just list everything out, figure out what can be done by someone else, and don't be afraid to start small, because it's a low barrier of entry, and that's where we find that's where you're going to find kind of the most value and the most peace of mind with what you're doing, and that'll enable you to have the confidence to then scale your team, scale your one staffer into potentially them being full-time, or developing teams of remote staffers, as you get more and more comfortable with the feel and look of the remote staffing space.
Is the fee for VA staffing agency built into the compensation, or is there a separate fee or contract that you have with the agency?
So the contract is held with the agency, and assuming it's a established firm. What was the first part of that question? Sorry.
Oh shoot, sorry, I pushed it to the other side. Hold on a second, I gotta
I'm
go
sorry.
back to. No, it's okay. We'll get it back here. Oh, they were asking how the fees work. How?
Yeah. So I mean, the fees are typically, you're going to have some sort of administrative fee, which covers all the setup and everything being done on the back end of this virtual staffer. And then once you move into a paying role where the virtual staffer is part or full time, whatever admin fee is, for that particular firm is built into the hourly rate. So it sticks to what I originally said, that you're looking at one hourly rate, and that's what you're paying week on week. And that's really the only charge you're going to be seeing separate of that original setup fee.
Okay.
And sorry, just, you also notice, some staffing firms will waive that setup fee depending on your use case and scenario. So there are workarounds, but the general setup is you pay one fixed rate every week based off the amount of hours the staffer works.
Okay. In your experience, what training do you provide virtual staff? I would say he means himself, so as
Yeah.
to not compromise any restrictive definition of contractor versus employee.
So regarding the training, the training is a little different for a contractor just because they're not going to be sitting right next to you, you showing them something. Typically how I handle my training with virtual staffers is when I'm looking for the person or the position, I'll draft a job description, and that will generally, allow me to, find and source and vet, exactly what I'm looking for. And again, these are things that a staffing firm would handle for you. They'd create the JD job description, and they would handle all the vetting all the way to the point where you're interviewing candidates that have been vetted, and are, ready to start in your role, at least on paper, and you have those conversations and you choose who ultimately you want to use. But as far as the training, it really varies based off position. So if you have a more admin related position, it may be a lot simpler to train them. Yeah, they get access to your emails and calendar. They may get access to your CRM, and the things are more data entry and, very easy to follow steps. I know I just trained a social media VA, much more comprehensive, in the training, because in order to be a social media VA, you really have to have an understanding of how that whole sphere works. And, need to have a lot of experience, and need to have things you can bring to the table. And it's a lot more analytical and a lot less implied. So it really varies. But typically, you could get set up with a virtual staffer, fairly quickly, as long as what you need to be done is defined. And again, these are things that a larger, more established firm would help you with, as far as creating SOPs for your virtual staffer or whatever may be needed, to get them set up and operational with your business.
Okay, I think that we covered all the questions. I had a couple repeat questions, so I think we've hit everything. Just to recap, I will be setting out a follow-up email to everyone that attended today. It will include our presenter's contact if you come up with a question that we missed, and also that QR code for the additional information. Um, and I just want to thank Karl for a great presentation today, and you did a great job. And we're thankful that you were able to share your knowledge with our SCORE clients today. And we hope to see everyone on a future webinar. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you, Teresa and SCORE. And thank you, everyone, for listening.